Leviticus 19 is a very important chapter. One of the reasons why we do Leviticus is not to know what God wants the Israelites to do, and now what the Jews are supposed to do. And we always look down on the book of Leviticus, mainly because we have been told that these are the laws that the Jews must obey. See, whenever there are commands, there is a motivation behind the command. There is a reason why God wants his people to behave a certain way. And that behavior is what God is trying to express in all these chapters, mainly because not to make life difficult for the Israelites, but for the Israelites to know who God is. What kind of a God is he? What character is this God that we believe in? How do we walk before him? And how do other people who do not know God can see God through us, his people? That would be a better way of looking at the book of Leviticus, especially this particular chapter, chapter 19. Now, chapter 19 begins this way, and the Lord, Jehovah, and every time you see the capital letter is Jehovah. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to all the congregation of the children of Israel. The focus, the children of Israel. Why the children of Israel and not the foreigners? Is because God is the God of Israel. And if the God of Israel speaks to the children of Israel, then the children of Israel must demonstrate a certain behavior, a certain characteristic, a certain perangai, right? Because then it will reflect the God they believe in. And so when you look through this verse and say to them, God wants Moses to say exactly this to them. You shall be holy. And the word holy is kadosh. For I, the Lord your God, am holy. Basically, he's saying is, be holy, for I, your God, am holy. And the focus, as you can see, are a couple of things. One, of course, holy, right? It's the focus. The second is I. God is saying, Ani Yehovah Elohim, Kadosh, right? And it means that I am the Lord. I am your God. I am your God, children of Israel, right? I am your God, me. And you must be holy because I am holy. And remember, we dealt with this word before. And just be clear, holy is a very abstract concept. The easier way to understand holy is special, right? Special or different. We also say it's set apart. That's why it's different, right? It's sacred because it's set apart for sacred use, right? That's what it means. And so if you look at these words and you replace holy with them, then you will see that you shall be different. For I, the Lord your God, am special. So you could use these words to represent these concepts in this verse, telling the children of Israel, and by extension us, when we believe in this God, that we must be kadosh. We must be different from the rest of the world. We must be different from the Canaanites, different from the Egyptians. We must be different from the rest of those who do not believe in God. They may believe in other gods, but we who believe in Jehovah Elohim, we are to be different. Why are we different? Because God says, I, the Lord your God, is special. It's different. It's different from all other gods. And that would be the beginning of the basis of this chapter. So now in verse 3, it gives us a slight reminder, I think, if you remember Exodus chapter 20, When God gave to the Israelites at Mount Sinai what we commonly call the Ten Commandments. And one of the things that you find is that following on from chapter 18 yesterday, about the father and mother, that you should not have sex with the father and mother. You shall not even have sex with the close relatives of the father and mother, including the wives of your father and your extended family, because we are there to protect them. So to revere, this word here, to revere, you'll be surprised to find out that this is to fear. And we don't like to use the word fear. We like to use the word revere. To be honest, revere has no meaning in my mind. To fear is a very concrete meaning, that every one of you shall have fear of his mother and his father. Why? Because they gave birth to you, they protected you, they helped you grow up, they brought you up, and they guided you, and they taught you. And you need to fear them because they are your parents, your father and your mother, right? You shall fear the two of them. And then to keep, to guard my Shabbat. That also came into the Ten Commandments. Why do you need to guard the Shabbats? The Sabbath is a day of rest, right? Why do you need to do that? Because the day of rest has to deal with the reality of God. God made the world in 6 days, and on the seventh day, he rested and he blessed the day and he made it holy. And so Shabbat is a holy day. So you shall be holy because the Shabbat is holy. The Shabbat reminds us of God who created the world and rested on the day of rest, on the Shabbat. And so to keep my Shabbat is to make sure that the next generations and the generations to come will always remember the meaning of the Shabbat. Keeping the Shabbat, like, oh, today is Shabbat, so we don't do anything, has no meaning because you're doing it blindly. But to remember the Shabbat, to keep the Shabbat in the way to remind everyone of God. I am the Lord your God. Ani Yehovah Elohim. Because he is the one who made the world. He is the one in Exodus 20 to tell us to keep his Shabbats, to honor your father and mother. In this case, use the word fear. So to fear your father and mother, to honor or kavod your father and mother, they are all in the same category. To put them important, to put them first, to treat them well, right? To honor them. Then comes verse 4. Do not turn to idols. Now, you would be interested to know that this word idols comes from the word El. And so this word idols is Elilim, also from Elohim, right? Do not turn to other gods. So by context, we know that this does not refer to Jehovah, because it says, I am Jehovah Elohim, your God, right? So do not turn. What do you mean by turn? Turn is pana. That's also from the same concept of shuv. Turn means you're going somewhere and you turn away. So this is also called pana. So do not turn to idols. So this is about direction, right? Where you face. So pana in terms of turn is about direction. Don't change course to idols. Don't make for yourselves molded gods. Molded gods means molten metal, right? melted down and put into a mold, and then you worship as a god. So this is an idol, clearly. So God says, don't make for yourself when you melt your metal and then form it into a shape of a god. Because I, Ani, Yehovah, Elohim, or your God. I am the Lord, your God. So you will see from here that the emphasis is about this. I, the Lord, your God. I am the Lord, your God. I am the Lord, your God. By knowing who God is, then it makes sense. If you don't know who God is, then it does not make sense at all. So that is what it means. I am the Lord your God. That's why you're doing this. I am the Lord your God. That's why you don't do this. Going on to verse 5. And if you offer a sacrifice, when you say offer a sacrifice of peace, of a peace offering, right? A peace offering actually is a voluntary offering. It is also a sacrifice of thanks. Right? This is a peace offering. This is to thank God where everything is complete, because this is shalom. Remember, we talked about this. Shalom comes to the same root word as shalom. When everything is complete, when it's paid for, when it's done right, then we have shalom. So this is a shalom type of offering, right? It's a shalom offering to Jehovah. And this is a slaughter, right? This offering is a slaughter. Now, understand, this offering needs to be a slaughter when you offer it as a sacrifice to God. And then you are supposed to do it. You're supposed to do it, and this is the word, your own free will. Now, that's not exactly what it means, right? But it does have that kind of connotation. It is to your own pleasure, your own delight, right? And you are doing it out of your own will. Nobody is forcing you. You are grateful to God for the shalom that came from the shalom. You're offering because you want to, right? That is the kind of offering that if you do that, right? If you do that, and God says, you can eat this offering, but it must be eaten the same day and the next day. So you can only eat it in 2 days. If there is a remainder until the 3rd day, then it shall be burnt in the fire, so don't eat it. If it is eaten at all on the 3rd day, it is an abomination. And God says, that is a no-no. That is a no-no. Why? Because it is an abomination, unclean. It is unclean. So it is called unclean, an abomination. And that is important because God does not like this kind of meat. Not only He does not like this kind of meat, He doesn't want His people to eat this meat on the 3rd day onwards because it is considered foul, unclean. You cannot use it for sacrifice. It is like throw away. It stinks. To God, it stinks. That's what this means. Now, maybe they don't put salt to it to preserve. Maybe, right? That's why maybe after a couple of days, the meat will go bad. So you can only eat it on the first 2 days. Now, I'm just speculating. But that is what abomination means. And so it shall not be accepted, so you cannot eat it. Therefore, everyone who eats it shall bear his iniquity. That is his guilt, right? It is his guilt. This iniquity would be avon, not chatat, right? Avon. And why is it bad? Because he has profaned the hallowed offering to the Lord. What do you mean he has profaned the hallowed offering? He has defiled. It started well because you came and offer, but because you ate it on the third day, then you have violated the holiness. That is what it means. You have violated the hallowedness. This is the holy offering that you made to the Lord on the day one. It was good. God was happy with it. It was your own free will. You slaughtered and you offer a peace offering, a shalom, right? And you ate it on the first day. You ate it on the second day. But on the third day, it has to be destroyed. And my speculation is maybe it's gone bad. And God says, you're not supposed to eat it. If you eat it, you must bear your iniquity, and God will be angry. You're not only foul and unclean, that you have violated the holiness. What does God even say in conclusion? That person shall be karat from his people. This means to execute, to kill. And so this is serious to God. Notice, this is very serious to God. So don't play. So even though it may be a voluntary peace offering, it must be on God's terms, based on God's rules. And once you violate the rules, you violate the holiness. And in this case, God will be so upset that this person will be judged to be executed from his people. There is no atonement for persons like this. That is how serious in God's mind. Meaning, he doesn't care about God. So when God says, Ani Yehovah Elohim, means I am the Lord your God, that you must honor me. So listen to what I have to say. So if you offer sacrifice and you disregard what I say, then I will disregard you. And in this case, you'll be karat from your people. This is serious matter. Verse 9. Now this is also about how God looks at people. You know, the children of Israel and the visitors, the aliens or the sojourners that dwells among them, that travel with them out as they came out of Egypt. There are many people who are poor as well. And so God cares for those who cannot care for themselves. And God wants his people to take care of the rest. And God is very serious on that. So you read verse 9. When you reap your harvest of your land, when you go in and you have your land you've inherited and you plant things and you cut your harvest, do not, right? Do not completely harvest everything from the corners of your field. Nor shall you gather the gleanings of your harvest. Meaning, when you are harvesting, you drop some onto the ground, just leave them there. These are called gleanings, right? Gleanings. The remnants that drop off from your pile that you've been carrying. Leave them there. There must be those that you don't fully cut off from your harvest. Why? You shall not glean your vineyard, nor shall you gather every grape in the vineyard. So this would be for the grapes, right? This would be the harvest of your wheat, your barley, your everything else. Why? Why does God do that? You shall leave them for the poor and the stranger. Ani Yehovah Elohim. I am the Lord your God. The poor means they don't have land, so they can't plant. So they need to do something for you. And if they are so poor, they need to eat. And so God says, through you, God will take care of them. So as you have harvested, leave some for them to cut as well. And also for the stranger who will never inherit any land amongst you, that in the event that they need to eat, they can also do the same. I am the Lord your God who will take care of the poor and the aliens. And so God will be very angry if the Israelites don't do this. And so in God's mind, this is serious problem. We may not even call it sin. We will just say, oh, he's got no heart. But in God's eyes, God's rules, God is holy and God takes care of his people. And if his people who have the ability do not take care of the poor and the aliens who do not have land, then God will deal with them. That is how serious. Now, we also came across this, if you remember, when we were studying the book of Ruth. And Ruth came and she gleaned in the fields of Boaz. And it comes from this law, right? So that when you don't have a field, you have a place to gather so that you don't hunger. Next, you shall not steal, right? Verse 11, steal. Steal is to carry away what is not yours, basically, right? It's to be a thief, right? You take things, you deceive people to take away other people's things. So you're not to steal. You're not to deal falsely. This is interesting. You're not supposed to deal falsely. Not to deal falsely means to deceive, right? To be untrue, nor lie to one another. The idea to lie to one another is to trick. It's quite interesting to trick or to cheat, right? Or to do anything wrong. Okay. And so this is important to deal between man and man. And you shall not swear by my name falsely. This is interesting because we find it in the modern day a bit awkward because people just promise anything. But in the good old days, your word as you swear by God, you have die also you must do. So in this case, if you swear and you make an oath by the name of Jehovah, saying, by the name of Jehovah, as he lives, I promise to do this. And if you don't do, then God will strike you dead. You know, that is the kind of swearing. So don't swear falsely. Don't swear as a lie. Don't treat this as a lie. Okay. An oath that you swear must be honored because you're using the name of God. But more important, even if you say it, you must do it with or without the name of God. You shall not profane. Profane means to defile, right? To defile, to desecrate, to simply use God's name, to violate the honor of God's name. Do you know, to violate the honor of God's name is not about pronouncing his name and simply pronouncing. It is way beyond that. When we who carry or bear the name of God do things to misrepresent God, we have violated the honor of God. When we do something that shows that God is unfaithful because we are unfaithful, we will have violated the honor of God. And God says, I am the Lord. Why? Because I am a faithful God. I will do what I say. I am a true and living God. That's why you don't cheat each other. I am alive and I can see what you do. Verse 13. You shall not cheat your neighbor. This would mean defraud, but it actually means to oppress. You don't go against your neighbor. You don't extort your neighbor. You don't force your neighbor. You don't do violence and wrong against your neighbor. Right? You do not, what do you say, rob him. Now, to rob him means this, to tear away. Right? You do not take his things, right, by force. So all these things about feudalism, right? I'm the boss. I can do anything to you. You're not to do any of these. You cannot rob your employee. The wages of him who is hired shall not remain with you all night until morning. Now this one means when you owe your employees wages, you must not hold it back. Now, those days it's daily wages, right? If it's monthly wages today, you're not to keep it and make life difficult for those whom you hire. You shall not curse. This word curse is a very, it's not actually the word curse, right? It's you shall not speak bad, right? You shall not speak bad of those who cannot hear you because he's deaf. So curse is about speaking. So you are not supposed to speak bad things about the deaf. He can't hear you. Okay? You are not supposed to give a stumbling block, something that trips somebody in the face of the blind. When he is blind, he can't see where he's going. He will trip. And then God says, fear the Lord. This literally fear the Lord. Ani Yehovah. You must fear them because God protects them. Why does God protects them? Because they can't protect themselves. So the people must not do anything against them. If you do anything against them, it's like doing against God. Verse 15, you shall do no injustice. Injustice means things that is not fair. Right? You cannot be not fair when you make a judgment. When you pass a judgment, you must be fair. You cannot be not fair. All right? You shall not be partial to the poor and honor the person of the mighty. Reminds you a little bit of what the book of James say, right? You cannot be partial. What do you mean partial? Well, the idea here is, let me give you the literal meaning. Lift face. Meaning this, you cannot look down on the poor. You cannot look up to the mighty. Right? Who is the mighty? the people who have a lot of things, right? The people who is rich, who possess a lot. And so God says you cannot be partial. You cannot treat the poor badly and treat the rich well. In righteousness, you shall judge your neighbor. Righteous means to be right, and this is by God. You shall not go about as a talebearer among your people. What is a talebearer? A talebearer is to slander. Is to go around telling bad things about other people, to spread bad news, right? To tell tales. And this thing is not tell good stories, but tell bad stories, right? The idea here is to hurt the other person. So God says, you shall not do that. This is not for you to do. You're not supposed to go and do these things. You're not to be a talebearer. You shall not take a stand against the life of your neighbor. You don't take a stand. What do you mean you don't take a stand? It means that you do not take a position, or I think take a position would be to be a good thing. Take a position, or take a stand, right? A stand against, to be opposing. And in this case, it would be that there is no good reason, right? You don't take an opposition, you don't go out and fight against the life of your neighbor, which means this: you do not take justice into your hands. I am the Lord. Ani Yehovah. Why? Because God will judge. You don't need to go and kill your neighbor just because you think that he has done something against you. Right? Let's look at verse 17. You shall not hate your brother in your heart. This is one of those rare occasions that talks about in your heart. But since in your heart is an abstract form, then how do you explain this in a more concrete manner? Being hateful is what this is, right? Being hateful. If your heart is where you make your choices, where you make your will, your decisions. So when you make decisions, do not be biased to wanting to hate and hurt your brother. That's what it means here. You shall surely rebuke your neighbor. Rebuke your neighbor means to reprove, to, how should I say, to point you are right. Right? You're there to argue that you are right. That's okay. Right? So you can do that. So you just argue, right? And you should not bear sin because of him. Now the word sin here is hatat. This is really sin for carelessness. What does this mean? It means this: in such a situation, you do not let the wrong that your neighbor do or your brother do lead you to do another wrong because of him. That is what this means. You can point out your position. You can say you are right. You can explain that you are right. You can prove your point. But you're not there to kill him, fight him, take his things and do, and all these, you will bear your sin. That's what it means. You shall not take vengeance. You shall not avenge. Bear any grudge against the children of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And this is where the beautiful verse of love your neighbor as yourself come from. I am the Lord your God. I am the God who is going to judge. You cannot judge. You are to make decisions for your neighbor. So love is to give. You are to give of yourself to your neighbor as you would give to yourself. And so if you read this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself in full right here, you realize that you are not to take any action against your neighbor such that it will lead you to do something wrong. So don't bear a grudge against others. Don't take vengeance. Why? Because vengeance belongs to the Lord. You are not to avenge. God will be the judge and God will decide on the punishment. And so God says, don't go and take justice into your hands. You must love your neighbor as you would yourself. Will you slap yourself? Will you kill yourself? You won't. So do the same to your neighbor. It is not about just giving gifts and goods and food to your neighbor. It is also not to stand against your neighbor, not to bear grudge against your neighbor, not to take vengeance against your neighbor, but you shall love the neighbor as yourself. Verse 19, you shall guard my statutes. This is God's statutes. Now, statutes is important. Statutes, hukah, right? Hukah would be the ordinance. Ordinance means your boundary. This is within this boundary, you can do. Outside the boundary, you cannot do. So what is the boundary? The boundary is this. Do not let your livestock breed with another kind. Another kind means of a different breed. It is to prevent crossbreeding, right? A sheep and a goat are two different kinds. And you don't want offspring from that. That is what it's saying, right? You shall not sow your field with mixed seed. So you don't have barley and wheat mixed together. You will have only barley, only wheat, right? Nor a garment of mixed linen and wool. You either have a garment of linen, which the high priest wears, or you will have wool from the sheep, but you don't mix the two. Now, why does God talk about this? God is saying that this is important because God doesn't want his people to be mixed and crossbreed and live like one together, where you cannot tell the difference one from another. And the result would be bad as well. That is God. He wants his people to be holy. For you shall be holy, because I, the Lord your God, am holy. And so don't mix around. And so don't mix around doesn't mean don't talk to people. Don't live amongst them so closely that nobody can tell left or right. Nobody tell from you and others. Right? You shall not sow. You shall, and you don't have plants that grows because you can't harvest them. When your barley and wheat is mixed together, they both are harvested at different times. But when you cut one, you will cut the other. And hence this is symbolic. And of course, it's practical in life, but it's also symbolic of how God wants his people to be different, separated from the world, different, do things differently. So when people see you, they see God. Now we will take a break in verse 19. We will do the rest on Monday. It is a long passage, but I think it is important for us to spend some time because it really describes who God is and why we ought to behave this way. I don't think we should see things as black and white and these are things to do. I think we should see why God is telling us this and why is He wanting us to do this so that we know our actions are consistent with God's character. And this is what God means by holiness. Any questions?
Pastor, verse 19, I think our present science, people have been mixing different breeds, even on the field, different kind of seeds they will mix. So has that got anything to do with this?
Okay, let me just
That
clear
is
the
quite
screen.
common today, right?
Right. Actually, what God is saying is this. Remember first the principle. The principle is holy, set apart. And so, how do you see holiness here? So, when you plant things on the ground, and so you have seeds and it grows, and then you have other seeds mixed in between and it grows. And so, when you harvest, you have a problem because you can't tell one from another. So, holiness to be different, right? To be separate. This is not holiness. That's what it means. This is not holiness. And in practical terms, you can't harvest, right? You've spoiled the harvest. Same thing with animals. So what they do is that they will keep their harvest, their planting separate. And then this way. That is what God is trying to say. Keep them separate. So today, when people plant things together, they don't plant it this way. They still plant it this way, but within a field that is big, they still segment the field. So when they harvest, they don't cut down the others that's not ready for harvesting.
Oh, it's not talking about genetically change.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. In this case, there's no DNA, not GM, not genetically modified.
Oh, it's not talking about that.
Yeah. See, even genetically modified, it's about the same kind of plant, like durians. You get D24, D101. It's still a durian. It doesn't come out a mangosteen tomorrow. So they are just trying to tweak it such that it behaves a certain characteristic. But in this case, it's about planting the seeds, not to mix the seeds so that you practically you cannot harvest, and you're not practicing holiness because you're not separating itself. Yeah. So when they have goats, the goats will be together, the sheep will be together, the cows will be together, right? They don't have one whole big happy family together.
It's not talking about crossbreeds.
They are trying to prevent crossbreeds. So a goat and a sheep can breed. Well, when they have somebody, then it will be a problem.
But I think present science, people are trying to crossbreed to produce better breed.
Well, in this case, there are two different kinds, meaning you don't want to cross a cow with a sheep or a goat. When animals are put together, they have a tendency to mix. And so God says to keep it separate. Don't have weird problems. That's what it means. Because some of these different kinds of animals, they can mate and their offspring doesn't live long anyways. And it's a problem genetically. But God is trying to say, don't mix them. And by doing this, it symbolizes holiness, that God is holy. It also helps them in their daily lives.
What about the garments?
Oh, the Jews today practice that very clearly. Single threaded garments. Single threaded garments. So linen or wool, not linen and wool.
But our material today quite a lot of mix, isn't it?
Our material today has
Cotton,
spandex, have
polyester.
plastic, polyester, has all kinds of things.
Oh.
That's true. That's true.
So we are not supposed to do that.
But I guess as we started Leviticus, I had mentioned I'm not trying to teach you how to be Jews.
Mhm.
So I will try to explain to you the motivation behind this. They could do that is because linen and wool are naturally grown. Today, we don't make our clothes, we don't spin our threads, we don't make our own clothes, and so it will be a challenge. The Jews, at least the religious Jews I know, when they go out and buy clothes, they make it a point to buy only wool, right? Or only cotton, and so on.
Is there
And
any significance in the wool and the linen? Because linen, they always talk about holiness. Even when they talk about
then the high priest
show,
uses
yeah,
linen.
and if they talk about showing sorrow and all that, it will be also linen, isn't it?
No, there is sackcloth.
Different. It's not.
Different.
It's not linen.
It's different. It's not linen. It's not linen. It's not linen. Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So the principle is there. Why God is doing that, and then in practical, their lives would be much better, right? I know today it is practically not possible to say that I'm going to throw out all my wardrobe and tomorrow I'll go and buy a brand new one. If you can, well, go ahead. Some of the goodness of a single threaded garment. When I was in Canada, the best garments for winter are those that is pure cotton, pure wool, and not acrylic. Yeah, not acrylic, not the fake one, the real ones. Are the ones that can protect us from the cold. Even cotton, you'd be surprised, right? We always think, oh, cotton is very 涼爽, but pure cotton is very good for winter.
Yeah.
Because it breathes, So God made all
Yeah,
these
breathable.
good things. Yeah.
So we are supposed to keep them pure, not to mix.
God wants them, because they are going to go into the promised land, they are to live differently from the Canaanites. They are to be living differently from the Egyptians that they learn all these things from. Now, for us today, we are not planting anyways, right? But the principle of holiness, nevertheless, is still there. God wants us to be seen to be different, that we don't mingle and live together so tightly that you can't tell one from another. Okay?
Okay.
All right. I'll
Thank
see you
you.
on Monday, and we'll continue from verse 20.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.